This entire construct is just so your family on the West Coast can see it. I was opposed to it in every way. In
every way. You don't think there's any element of this, because the idea wasn't presented to me by family members out in California or by anyone I actually know, just an acquaintance from the ESPN club back in the day. And do you not believe at all that this is helping to promote the show on any level, to draw other viewers and or listeners to the YouTube, to the podcast? Do you believe that it's all just a vanity project on my end?
I'd like to quote the great Yogi Berra. Not only do I not believe anything, I don't suspect anything. So I have no, that's a misquote, actually. Should be, not only do I not know anything, I don't suspect anything, but I have no way of knowing whether or not this is driving.
And yet you're going to go full tilt with the accusation that it's all a vanity project for my friends and family out in California.
You know why? Because I know you. And I know that whether or not it is driving is ancillary to the idea that it gives your family and friends a chance to see you. Because you were discussing people.
I think it's a fringe benefit. I think it's a fringe benefit, John. But this was really born out of promote. I mean, I don't know you don't think about promoting the show. I know you don't suspect anything about promoting the show. But I actually am trying to throw a bone, as weak as it is, toward promotion. And this was one of the ideas. And other people, chimed in on it and thought it was a good idea. And again,
agree to disagree. What came first?
Agree to disagree with the motivation of the YouTube.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, you are wrong on that one. And you're going to dig in like people that you accuse of doing this kind of thing all the time, without any facts to back up your point of view. And you're going to be wrong, because this was really born out of an idea of promoting the show. I mean, I
have a handful of facts, and
it is funny
that outside of Lenny Rowe, and if you're there, Lenny, hello. I actually don't have live comments on anymore, because childhood friends of yours and family members have complained about us and the live comments. So I'm sure that's going away soon. Because again, I am,
we're going to be able to do both, John. Again, we can hold two contrasting thoughts in our head. The philosophies you spew, you need to start living by.
I just want to point out to those of you watching and or listening that in the decision-making process of after further review, you reside higher on the totem pole than I do. I'm just pointing that out. That I am merely here to support the decisions you make in conjunction with your friends and
that is by your choice.
And family members.
That is your choice.
Right.
I go to you with all of the promotional things. You say, I don't want anything to do with it. You don't need me. I trust you implicitly.
Right. Which I don't. I'm lying. I trust you not at all. But I'm just, because what you send me would require my watching or listening to myself. And that is something that I cannot, that's a bridge too far for me, Mark. You know that.
Even a minute and a half promo, you can't, it's still a bridge too far. Are you going to watch yourself in the shower singing to One Last Time, for instance?
My wife is, yes. For those of you who don't know, and in an effort to explain to the folks who weren't with us prior to the show, which would be everyone, right? My wife posted a video on Facebook of my singing One Last Time from Hamilton in the shower.
I'm sure you're going to watch.
I did. My wife, because Jody said, "Hey, have you been on Facebook?" seconds after I got out of the shower, and I'm like, "Well, probably not." So I knew, and I had a sneaking suspicion because she's done it to me before. Because I'm a much bigger fan of musical theater than my wife is. And so we check off musical theater now. And Hamilton. We've touched on both of them. So the show is consistently the same.
Non-sports related.
Right. Non-sports related. But she's done that to me before, where I was doing some chores inside, was cleaning up or whatever, and she was coming home from work back when, do you remember that, back when people had work?
I don't remember that.
Yeah,
it's so long ago. It's just like, what? No.
Yeah. I've seen videos of that, me actually having a job, really the only thing that I've watched. But she has actually, I was listening to Pippin or something.
Of course you were.
At my time. And she has actually stood outside the door while I'm singing, not knowing that she's home, and recorded that and then put that on social media as well. So it's not unexpected that there's now video of me.
Okay, but you have been forced to watch it, is what you're saying.
Yeah,
against
she's like,
your will,
and then I right. And here's the good thing about it:
because you hate watching yourself.
It is simply a shot of the barn door that we installed from our bedroom to our bathroom a number of weeks ago. I don't appear in the video, and that makes it much more easier for me and much more palatable for me.
Right. I understand that. And now remember, John, I want to correct what you just said for the audience.
Good Lord.
And that is that it wasn't we installed the barn door. You installed the barn door.
Well, I'm giving her credit as well. She helped me a great deal. She really did help me a great deal. Mainly preventing me from harming myself when something would go wrong.
No, I understand.
Mainly it is taking away the sharp objects from me when something has gone horribly wrong.
Gotcha.
And which reinforces my self-image of I can't do anything right, and basically I should rid humanity of me.
It's so funny how you go so dark and then you go to this altruistic sort of point of view, like I want to rid humanity. I'm thinking really of the general good, ladies and gentlemen.
I am thinking of the general good. But anyway, So there's no shot of me and my enormous bison head. And so it's a little more palatable for me.
To your point earlier, we did receive some constructive criticism from people who just listened to the podcast,
friends and family of Mark,
and feeling that again, that's the only audience we have, since John has no friends or family that watch the show,
none whatsoever.
What they pointed out was that a couple of times during listening to the podcast, they felt they were missing out on something that was just a reference video wise. And one of the obvious things they point out are some of the comments. And as long as we promote as long as we talk about the comments that are put on the screen, I think it's fine. Tom Marino earlier said he'll stop listening because it's the only reason why we're doing YouTube are just to appease my friends and family.
Right.
So he was funny. And then Joe Connolly, who is a regular listener and viewer, mentioned that I am George Washington to John's Hamilton. But above and beyond that, I want to bring up Joe Connolly's comment after the last show, because I do think that comments that come to us either at podcast afr@gmail.com, where you can email us any sort of comments or voice memos or any other ways of social media that people communicate with us in terms of what happened, say, after the last show. We can bring it up at the top. And I know this is a brand new idea, but I didn't consult you, John, because to your point, you don't want to be consulted.
Right.
But I think that Joe had mentioned that and we'll talk about this briefly, and I want to just mention this as a comment, that it's the conferences, the big five power conferences, two of which have now said we're going to go only with conference only schedules. The SEC and the ACC are thinking about it. We'll see about how it all falls. We will talk about that later in the show. But he said the small colleges, we mentioned the independent schools, Notre Dame and so forth, but those small colleges, the ones I always make fun of, the Joe's College by the Sea for nuns next to Louisiana Tech.
Wow. On the Gulf Coast. It's on the Gulf Coast. I didn't know where that college resided.
It's a gorgeous campus.
I question the fiscal responsibility of a nun school that feels it needs to get prime real estate near the sea. But okay.
Well, the Catholics did that quite a bit in the history of their religion. So I think what we want to do is just acknowledge that the listener or the viewer note and asked and incorporate that into the show. And of course, his whole point is that these smaller colleges rely on that money. And we'll get to that. But my response to that, John, has always been, why don't you just cut them a check? Why don't you just cut them a check for the money that they would have made? And I guess the response to that is, well, that's revenue that Florida doesn't have, or Florida State doesn't have, because they don't have that entire gate for that game. So that's just going to come off of their bottom line. And that's not a very realistic possibility. Also, Tom Marino brought up about the pressure of Major League Baseball. And I want to get into this because this is not a topic for later on today, but the pressure of the players, getting up to bat and dealing with all of the pressures of Major League Baseball and getting a hit, getting on base, for crying out loud. There's a lot going on there in a Major League Baseball's mind. And if you also have worry about their family, worry about not seeing their family, worrying about their teammates who might have tested positive, worried about social distance next to the first baseman when you get up there, whatever it is that going to get in hitters' heads? In other words, is getting in that flow of hitting going to be really virtually, well, not virtually impossible, but much more difficult than it would have been in an average year?
Well, it's certainly an excellent question because hitting a baseball, there's a lot of obviously the mental aspect of the game coming into that. Now, perhaps let's just let me play devil's advocate with that just for a moment, Mark, and think that maybe all the outside pressures about that will allow these guys, maybe they'll just throw that off when they get there. That the one time they really can control what's happening is when they're in the batter's box or on the field. So I would argue that it's going to affect obviously different players different ways, but that perhaps the idea that these guys who, like the rest of us, have been so without control over everything in their life, maybe that moment where they have the control, maybe it will be helpful for them. Go ahead and point out what's happening now, because
no.
I think it's important. I think it's important to point out that one of the people who controls my fate post coronavirus has made another comment about my age, mentioning that that all the videos are on VHS tape, and now he's asked that Jeff put on glasses so that there's more synergy for the video. And I think that's just another backhand slap at my age and your age, Mark. And I think it becomes more and more apparent that our joking about never working again in our chosen field, I think we have a lot of evidence that we're going to be aged out as things. We knew that. We knew it. It's just there now in the comments.
It's a matter of time at this point.
It's there in the comments. I'm sure there's auditions going on right now. This wanted someone who's not John or Mark for sports host job. Hey, I get it.
I certainly understand that. There's no doubt about it. To your earlier point, and I think that's very good, John, that you've allowed all of our podcast listeners to understand that there is a dynamic in the comments right now that are throwing you for a little bit of a loop.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just so apparent.
Kind of throwing you off your game just a bit. Now, I want to respond to what you said about the Tom Marino question, because that's what when he talked to me about that late Friday afternoon after the show, I went back with him at that, telling him at least as an actor, as a performer, that some of my best shows have been when there's all kinds of crap going on in my life, because I can just go to the theater and just dive into the theater and dive into that role, dive into that show, and forget the world. And oftentimes those are my best in the moment type of performances. He said it's different for a musician. In his case, it's different because there's all kinds of other things going on. And in his case, he doesn't feel that way. But that is amazing that you brought that up, because I feel the exact same way about that maybe this could help these players, because they don't, everything else is so crazy. Why even worry about it? It's so crazy. Throw it off. I get to play a game for 3 hours, for crying out loud. I get to forget about the whole thing for 3 hours.
No two players are the same. Mickey Mantle has a great story about how he played in an all-star game with Ted Williams at some point, and he said Williams spent the whole time quizzing him about his batting. He's like, are you pulling more with your left hand when you're trying to pull the ball down the left field line? I mean, do you choke up a little at a 3-2 count? And Mantle said it just got so inside his head that he went like 0 for 30 following the All-Star game, because he was more
that was Williams' plan.
Right, exactly. He was more, and the Red Sox only finished 37 games out that year. So nice job, Ted. But illustrating the fact that they approached things differently. Now, obviously, Williams is much better for average hitter, so you can understand that. But the great Stan Musial, who we always brought up, Curt Flood, great interview with Curt Flood, where he said he asked Stan Musial, he said Stan would go 2 for 3 or 3 for 4 every day, just consistently. And Curt Flood said, Stan, how do you do it? And Stan Musial basically said, well, I wait for my pitch and then I hit it as hard as I can. And that was his approach. Other people's approach are different. So I think there will be guys who stay in their head, who it really has a negative effect on. But I think, by and large, I think probably that'll work itself out after the first couple of weeks. But we'll see. It's untrod territory.
I do want to mention one thing, Jeff. I know you want to chime in, but I want to say something else to a Tom comment about actors versus others who are, maybe have to be more in their head when they perform as opposed to instinctual. He said something about it might be different if you are reciting lines and not having to be sharp about what you're about to say. And, that is what actors can do, Tom. But when we call that kind of acting, calling it in, where it's muscle memory at this point, and you're not even listening to the actor. To me, it's the opposite. To me, you're even sharper and more in the moment when you have just left everything at the stage, at the stage door. You've left everything there, and now you're even sharper. You're in this actual moment. Nothing else is bugging you in your head. And you can actually react in an honest way as you would in that second in the theater, not just necessarily with how you rehearsed it 4 weeks ago.
Well, is it, and I mean, it's not the same depending on what you're asked to do as a musician. If you are reading music and performing within the context of a group number, then you are, I can see you're going by rote through the notes. Obviously, you want to bring some personality to that, but it's different if you're a jazz musician and now it's your turn to solo. That's going to be obviously an improvisational moment. And should be pointed out that most of the work that we're talking about, Mark, isn't our on-stage theater work. It's that improvisational moment where you and I have been at loggerheads screaming at one another about something completely divorced from what we're about to go out and improvise about. And we will just be at each other's throat and screaming and yelling. And we did all stress of just, having to deal with either you or I. Both you and I have to deal with each other, which I think is a heavy load for anyone to be asked.
It really is. It really is.
So, and then we can just let it go when we go out on stage. Because we are prepared in the macro for the moment. So again, this is a long way of saying, yes, I think that will affect some people, but I think there will also be players who can divorce themselves.
Who are instinct-based.
Yeah.
Jeff?
I wanted to present a reverse psychology thing about the baseball. And what if the Indians win the World Series and say, all right, from now on, 25% fans, social distanced every game going forward. This clearly worked for us. We are going with it.
And the social distancing and breaking up, not having all of those consistencies that you had all those years, which led to what is now when's the last time the Indians 48?
Yeah. 40s.
So 72 years hadn't worked. So maybe I ought to try something different.
Yeah, exactly. And that was Tom's point earlier about superstitions with baseball. It's like, oh my gosh. I mean, I've done it my whole life. I'm sitting in an awkward position because I was about to get up and grab a drink or something. And all of a sudden the Giants, hit a home run. And it's like, I've got to just stay in this position.
Right.
I obviously cannot move. And anyone that is familiar with that understands that I had no choice at that point. And anyone who is, even a half of a centimeter outside of the superstitious bubble that is Major League Baseball thinks it's absolutely crazy and hideous. And
no. I'll throw our good friend. I'm not throwing him under the bus, but our good friend Riley Claremont, he will fully admit this. There was a time while watching a game at my house, and I'm sure it was a Dolphins game, where Riley, having things not going his way, stood up, said, that's it, I have to change the mojo, and walked out of the house, got in the car, and drove home without any other words because he needed to change the mojo. And you and I have done things equally as ridiculous. God knows I've sat in the same seat or whatever, eaten the same thing. And I'm not even overly superstitious. So it is going to be interesting to see with these guys in baseball because, to Tom's point, baseball players tend to be the more superstitious of the athletes. it will be interesting to see how they do react to this. Wouldn't it be amazing if like Mike Trout bats like 180 and some double-A guy just shows up and just tears up the league? And would you be that surprised?
I wouldn't, because this whole season is going to be written off, certainly, but at worst, it's going to be viewed as possibly a joke, actually. And I'm reading more and more about that this is just a joke. Why even have a season?
Is that Buster Posey? Is Buster Posey, is he like under an assumed name now that he's not going to play? Are we getting a lot of the,
it doesn't even count. Season doesn't count. It doesn't matter.
It's really
matter. It's a joke.
It's really weird that, number one, if he's publishing under a different name, that there would be some sort of voice in anyone, that comes out of the newspaper.
Well, he's doing that voice.
Is he? Is he? So he's doing a podcast and he's just changing his voice and giving his opinion.
This is Nestor Hosey, not Buster Pope.
To be that whole thing. And, so he's the one saying it's just a joke.
No, but
I'm Nick Markakis, they're all getting together.
I am reading that. I'm reading that, and Tommy doesn't think it's going to go more than 30 days because of all the different problems that are going to happen, and people are going to have to either cancel games or reboot on certain things. And after a while, they're just going to throw their hands up in the air. Now, these are worst case scenarios.
Sure.
But even the best case scenario, it's going to be, what the heck, 60 games. You can't even tell, everyone's going to have this weird blip in their statistics as you scroll down the years in any particular player. They're going to come to 1 year. It's like, what the hell happened?
Right.
Either a 220 hitter, to your point, and all of a sudden they're hitting 340.
Right.
Or they are, perennial MVP or runner up MVP like Mike Trout, and can't get above the Mendoza line because he just can't get out of his head with this whole thing.
I just that bothers me. The people, can't we approach it? I'm approaching it as if they play and they have a baseball season, it is a completely viable tournament of baseball with the best baseball players in the world, the guys who choose not to play notwithstanding, having a competition that I'm going to enjoy watching. I don't know why. That's the thing with baseball, and where I really, really differ with the old school people, thinking everything has to be folded into a neat little narrative. There's just not a neat little narrative.
Well, certainly not today, but the narrative that is so neat for these people you're referring to, John, are statistics primarily.
Right. That's what I mean.
Which is why, why the steroids thing bothered them so much, why the 162 game schedule bothered everybody so much, and why there had to be asterisks, or at least debates about asterisks.
But they're all hypocrites anyway. If Mark McGwire had been on their team, I'm sure all the Cubs fans are up in arms. Oh my God. If Mark McGwire, and then they conveniently they have to not pay attention to the Sosa thing over here, or Brewers fans who are, it would have been us. Come on, whatever, move on, people.
Yeah, I agree. But the thing, what I compare it to? It's akin in golf to match play, which I think is a little bit more NICU than normal normal scoring for golf.
Yeah.
And, so in other words, if the best golfers in the world had to do, I don't know, over the course of 2 months, 10 match play events to determine who wins this season, if you will, as opposed to 25 or 30 PGA normal events with 18 holes with normal scoring, I think that's what the equivalent is. And if you like golf, you're probably going to like it. And it's just a different kind of thing.
It's the Ryder Cup. It's why there are guys on tour who win a lot more tournaments than other guys who are more successful Ryder Cup golfers, because it fits what they do and their mindset. That's so let's just approach this really fun 2.5 month tournament, which is what baseball is going to turn into, if again they can get through that. And I kind of lean towards Tom Marino's thoughts that I'm not particularly confident they're going to be able to play 2.5 months straight through without things happening. But that notwithstanding, let's just look at it as that and something different in a time where baseball could have very easily just walked away and said, you know what, only playing 60 games and it cheapens the history of the game. It can't do this very well with it. The history of the game. And in my mind, it's just, Can't we just be happy?
By
that
the
we're
way,
gonna have-
podcast listeners, John
I was
Pelkey
doing.
was
I'm
referring
sorry. Oh my
to
God, this is going to be a thing
his
now.
quote,
Jesus.
his
Trying to do air quotes, and oh God, this is you.
We've got to be
Jesus,
mindful.
you're going to be
We've got to be
friggin'
mindful,
just the.
John. It's important.
I just like to point out for the radio show. I used to always have to go back and put your stuff in context when you would non sequitur. So
it's okay. I understand. I understand you being defensive over things I'm pointing out wrong. I get it. I get it. You're right.
All right. Shouldn't we have done the progressive by now if we're pointing out things that are wrong? Here we are, 26 minutes in, and there's no progressive, and it ain't mine. So
let's do the progressive because we are ready to do that right now.
So
All right,
angry.
here we go. Progressive. It's just like, come on, man. Come on. You got to dish it out. You got to be able to take it as well. You were doing air quotes. No one knew what you were referring to.
All right, whatever.
So here we go. Progressive trivia. We're looking for a NFL football player who has led the league in receptions, who has been an all-pro, who has 60-plus TDs in his illustrious career, over 1,000 playoff receiving yards, led the league in receptions, all-pro, 60-plus touchdowns, and 1,000-plus playoff receiving yards. So, all-pros, a lot of playoff experience, has led the league. It's pretty nebulous, but it is somewhat narrowing. And that is our first set of progressives. And now, John Pelkey, I want to ask you this. You're the Redskin guy, and so is Jeff. You guys are the DC guys.
Yep.
I do want to start out with this, John, because Max Kellerman of ESPN just went off on Daniel Snyder. And it is a very good point that he brought up,
right?
Which is all of the polls that I, by the way, have quoted in the past, I believe even on this show and on previous shows, where this idea that my whole problem was, it's a bunch of white elites, white elite liberals, guilty liberals that are trying to change this name. I'm not hearing it from the Native American community. As a matter of fact, I'm reading that 90% of them don't care. Well, according to Max Kellerman and the rant he was on, that was based on one poll
in 2004,
and the scientific method of that poll was highly questioned and actually undermined, and that there have been 2 subsequent polls where the scientific method was actually done the proper way for polls, and it was virtually the opposite findings. And for Daniel Snyder to run with this 2004 poll and to talk about digging your feet in the, digging your heels in, for him to just stubbornly refuse to even consider this for the last 15 or so years is pretty despicable. And it's like, I'm just thinking, is there something in the water? You've got Calvin Griffiths. You've got Dan Snyder. I mean, what is
George
it
Preston
about
Marshall? George
Preston Marshall. What is it about? What is it about the Washington D.C. teams?
Let me just say, let me say this about the poll. It was an Annenberg poll, and there are a lot of questions about it. And I think anytime you see a poll which is 90-10, we can't 90-10 any question on earth. No. I mean, God, we live in Florida, and if you had a poll with would you prefer free ice cream for life or a kick in the nuts, it'd be 51-49 one way or the other because it's Florida and that's how things work here. So any 90-10 poll is, it is questionable. But and there were other polls and everything like that. And I think Kellerman's larger point was, and it's one that I agree with because I think the name should have been changed many, many years ago, is that it's great that it's happening. I'm very happy that it's happening. But it wasn't pushed by any sort of altruism by Dan Snyder, who had dug his heels in this. And I get it. Sometimes you make a statement and, never, ever will this happen. Well, never say never, to quote a really, really bad Styx song. He kind of dug himself in. He had to make the changes that he's making now because Nike pulled out, FedEx pulled out, other teams were taking the merchandise off their, or the NFL was taking merchandise off their site, or there were any number of things. It was driven by economics, and that is what it is. Follow the money. Most things are driven by economics. Disney is reopening because they want to make money. It's not, oh my God, we have to give people the magic, which, there is a thought for that. But So yeah, Max Kellerman, I think Kellerman was right. I'm not as angry or vitriolic towards Snyder about it because I think that's a decision that a lot of owners would have made, and it would have traveled down the same highway to get where we are right now. So right. I'm just glad it's happening. I'm surprised, and I think Jeff would probably be too. I'm really surprised it happened as quickly as it did, because I just didn't think logistically, and they haven't come up with the new name yet because they want to buy up every possible website they can before they do that, knowing what it is. So I don't get, WashingtonRedtails.com, and then Snyder's going to have to deal with me. So again, agree with Kellerman. It was driven by economics, but I think most things are driven by economics.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. I don't think there's any doubt of that. Follow the money, and you'll get to the bottom of every issue, including why we haven't solved immigration or infrastructure or any of the hotbed issues, is because people don't want to. They don't want to solve the problem. They want to campaign on the problem, because if you campaign on the problem, you can raise the coffers, and this is both sides. And we've talked about that before. All right, Jeff, are you surprised at the speed of which they made this call?
Yeah, it took me by surprise that it happened so fast. But let me preface this by saying I really couldn't care less. But I didn't think Dan Snyder was ever going to change the name. I thought ownership change was going to happen.
I agree with that. 100% agree with that. I really never thought, because again, he dug himself in so deeply with it. But he wants to keep the team.
Yeah.
And frankly, if it looked like keeping the name would have made him more money, he would have kept the name. It's just that simple. So sometimes the right things happen for the wrong reason. And quite generally, when they happen in our society for the wrong reason, it's because of economics. Follow the money.
Well, and frankly, I think that's one of the major positives of the capitalistic system, John, is that if you can make, if doing the right thing aligns with making the most money, we are going to do the right thing faster than anyone.
Right.
No,
that's why boycotts sometimes work. I'm not a huge fan of cancel culture, but I have no problem with if people say, hey, I want to boycott this. I don't always agree with their boycott, but that's one way. As a consumer, you can make yourself heard. And the most effective way, I think you can make yourself heard. So people did it. That's what's happened.
And to your point, it was a completely economic decision. I think Daniel Snyder just seriously had no choice whatsoever. Okay, so we have to mention that one of our listeners has gotten it right. One of our viewers has gotten it right. We won't tell you what the answer is, but we will give Joe Connolly credit. He got it right, which I don't. I won't say anything else, but I'm going through the same. Let's just put it this way: I'm going through the same exact emotions that John Pelkey goes through when after.
I think I know how and why he got it right. Pointing that I did not get it right. I actually guessed else because I think Joe and I both approached it in the same way. We looked into your motivation for who you would choose, and I went with
we're playing poker here, and I'm just giving you tells.
It's really true. I went down one alley. He went down another. He was correct. I was incorrect. So there you go. Well done, Joe Conley.
And Tom Marino, his second guess that he has out there when he put names up there is absolutely correct. So obviously not very well done on my part, but we will continue to give these clues out during the course of the show. All right, we
have no evidence people aren't using performance-enhancing devices. Let's just be honest right here. We don't know that. And we have a little evidence from, I know, God love Lenny. I know he said he did it after the fact, but he did point out that, at one point that you had mentioned the wrong bowl game.
It was the Armed Forces Bowl as opposed to the
Sun Bowl or something. I don't
know.
No,
not Alamo
Bowl.
It was another A bowl.
Right.
Which, the people that say it's one of the
here we go.
states.
Here we go. Jeff, could you check off Mark has an issue with how many bowl games there are as a discussion point?
Yes.
Again, I'm not going there, but yes, it seems like I am. But there is a reversal at the end of this particular
What
story.
does it matter? Alamo, Armed Forces, Armadillo. It's a bowl game that shouldn't exist. Well, I don't know, Mark. It's the Salukis of Southern Illinois and Temple.
Oh, gosh. Who cares? But the point
Hey,
is
as long
that
as 100,000 people keep showing up, they're going to keep having bowl games. They will add until the people stop going.
Speaking of economics driving it, we will continue to have ridiculous, meaningless bowl games so people can just meaninglessly throw away their money at a meaningless, stupid NICU game that only they care about.
Oh my God.
Beyond that, I was going to say the people that treat the United States, the map of the United States, like I treat bowl games. You know, I run across all kinds of people. They say, I think it was in Massachusetts or one of those M states. When someone says one of those M states, I think, okay, there's Montana, there's Missouri. I mean, there's a lot of M states. There's Minnesota, there's Michigan,
Maryland.
It goes all across the country. It goes from the West to the Midwest to the East Coast, and
Utah.
And one of the M states.
I don't understand things west of the Mississippi, so
I understand that
Montana, not be Utah,
Montana, and Minnesota.
It's not Utah. Is that?
It is not. There's no state called Utah, but good.
Fair enough.
It's close to another state that's out in the West, John. So I give you credit.
Since
you think that it's just sea monsters out there in California, it's just burning down missions, which they just did yesterday. Yes,
sent you evidence of that.
But that's my approach to college, and I understand how it's so dismissive because I think that about people that say it's an M state. I think, how do you not know? How do you not understand the geography of your own country, for crying out loud?
No, it's large. It's a big country.
Yes, it is, but it's only 50 states. It's not that difficult to figure out. And there's actually less states than bowl games. So I think
every state needs a bowl game. I would advocate for that. There should be a bowl game in every state.
There you go. Sure there is.
There may be very close to that.
There will be. There will be by the time this show is over. There'll be 50 bowl games, despite the pandemic.
After further review bowl game. Of course, Mark will confuse it with the Armed Forces Bowl while doing a progressive trivia
and getting caught because Lenny cheated. So that's how we're going.
There it is.
All right. So speaking of college football, Pac-12 and Big Ten have done the in-conference thing.
Mm-hmm.
The SEC commissioner came out. I think his last name is Sankey.
Sankey. It's not Stanky.
Stanky.
Jesus, good Lord.
I mean, it's just a name. There's plenty of people named like Ed Stanky. There was a baseball player, I think, Ed Stanky, or a football player. And anyway, he has come out and really backed off. He was honest. Any sort of he's not predicting anything. He's literally waiting for the science to tell him what to do.
Right. He basically said, yes, I have concerns that we're going to be able to do this. And I think that's admirable. I was surprised. Both you and I, we actually exchanged some texts when that story hit the wire, and we were both a little surprised that he was as honest as he was, particularly given the rabid nature of Southeastern Conference football fans. That I'm sure there was a backlash on social media about hoaxing and all that crap about it, but he was upfront about it, and I think he owes it to everybody to be that way, because they don't even know that. Some of these colleges don't even know, universities, that students will be back on campus. And I know that there were a couple of coaches early on and university presidents who said, how do we justify having games if we don't have students on campus? So good for him for acknowledging that this is none of this is a done deal at this point. The NBA has had to cancel, some teams have canceled practices. More people are testing positive. So it's an ongoing concern. And I give the commissioner of the Southeastern Conference kudos for being honest.
Also, the Patriot League, along with the Ivy League, are now canceling all fall sports.
Right.
I'm wondering, what's it going to take? I mean, I'm thinking it's a month from now. Let me ask you guys this. Within a month, because we're setting record numbers for cases right now, record numbers. And it's not just the amount of tests, it's the amount of positives in the tests that are alarming, to say the least.
Right.
Anything from 12 to 20%, which is should be, is like 3 to 4, 5, 6 times what it should be.
Mm-hmm.
So if in 1 month from now, we've had a full month to have people play out there. The illness plays out with these folks. They either get hospitalized or they recover. Some of them pass away. If the numbers are what they are now, and actually what they were, I would say a week ago, when it was about 200, say a day, 300 a day deaths in the entire United States, which was if you're talking about 50,000 cases, then it's less than 1%. So it's getting into flu territory in terms of mortality rate. If in a month from now the death rate, even though it has spiked over the last couple days, it has spiked, but if it goes back down to 200 or 300 and it just sort of settles in there, and we're getting more and more cases, it's becoming clearer and clearer. I would think that there's if not a herd immunity, there's the mortality is something we can all sort of live with, the mortality rate, more like the flu. Do you think, if that's the case, that what I just said, that postulated position would be more mainstream than not, in terms of how people looking? So in other words, okay, this is how it is. I might get it, but the percentages are so low, and I'm in well, I think if as condition, I'll risk it. I'm going to go to a ball game. I think as postulated the way you are, I think we will go on with the seasons as they are laid out at this point in time. And I think they're, as of right now, NBA and NHL, they haven't said anything about fans at this point, right? I mean, there's been some speculation, but there's been no decisions made for that. And there really haven't been for baseball either. It's really NFL that has come out with some protocols. Right. I mean, I think if as you laid it out, it's there. Yeah. I mean, I think there would be people who would be willing to, a larger percentage of people would be willing to go to games than there are right now. I think the bigger question for me is that if things continue along the course that they are now and they don't change much, that the rate is as high as it is, and the mortality rate, which again is a lagging indicator, we'll know more in a month. I think that's important to I think basketball and hockey, given the way that they're bubbling this thing, they have a much better chance of being able to move forward than does baseball, because of the spread out nature of how they're going to have to play those games. I think that could jeopardize baseball moving forward more than it will basketball or hockey. What about college football? What about the fact that I think the SEC is going to play? I think the SEC is going to play a number of games, no matter. I think if the sea catches on fire, that they'll. I think they are hellbound to have football games and have even with some level of even with the commissioner's statements. You don't see that. You think he'll be voted out, or he'll? Yes. I think that I think the universities involved and the powerful alumni and the people who drive that sort of thing. I think some horrific change in things, and I think it's bad enough right now, at least for me. But then I think that they will move forward come hell or high water. Yeah, I do. Wow. And what about the ACC? Same, and Big 12, basically, amongst the Confederacy. I go with the SEC because I know the SEC better, haven't gone to an SEC school, but I think they're all going to approach it that way. Football is king in the Southeastern Conference. In the ACC, it's more of a basketball conference. The Big 12 is somewhere in between, I guess. I'm just going with the SEC. Okay. I don't know about the others. I think they'll probably follow suit a little bit. I think they're looking at where the Southeastern Conference is, since they are your most the biggest money-making conference, and apologies to the Big Ten, they really are the conference of note in college football. So I'm just going to go with the SEC. I think they're going to play, whether it is 8 games or 12, I don't know. But I think come hell or high water, the SEC is going to have some sort of football season. Well, and I think right now, as we speak, the Pac-12 is, and the Big Ten is as well. I mean, they're planning on playing football. They've just told it about a schedule adjustment is all right. But I think things could. I think that if the death rate were to climb, God forbid, and that I think that they would probably be more likely to back off of that than would the SEC. Okay.
I think the Southeastern Conference is the most likely sport. College football is the most likely sport to start up a season that they're not finished. Again, NBA and NHL are finishing off their seasons trying to crown a champion after they played 68 games in the NBA, I believe, and they're to the playoffs, I guess, in the NHL, or getting closer to the playoffs in the NHL. I think that's a different animal, but for a sport to start up that hasn't started a 2020 season, I think college football is the most likely.
And the SEC specifically.
Yeah.
Within college football. The SEC is the most likely entity to start their season when they were supposed to start and complete a vast majority of that season of any entity in North America right now.
Yes, that would be my
guess. I agree with that.
That would be my guess.
That makes perfect sense. All right, let's go back to progressive trivia. And congratulations to Joe Connolly, who got it right initially, and Tom Marino got it right seconds after that. Let's go back to our progressive trivia. First 4 clues where I've led the league in receptions. I'm an all-pro, 60-plus touchdowns, 1,000-plus playoff receiving yards. Next clue coming in, 14-plus years, 900-plus receptions. Played in multiple Super Bowls, in his case, 3, I believe.
2.
And played for 3 teams. 3 teams. So, so those are the clues one more time. Let's go back. I have led the league in receptions, all-pro, 60-plus touchdowns, 1,000-plus playoff receiving yards. We've got 14-plus years in the league, 900-plus receptions in his career, played in multiple Super Bowls, and played for 3 teams. All right, that's it. And apparently it was easy. I don't understand why it was easy. I suppose, to your point, John, it's all about digging
your motivation.
in. Yes, digging into the psychology of where I'm coming from, and that's not too difficult a thing to do because it's usually 1, 2, or 3 different lanes.
No, and let me just say, we both sort of every now and then when you're putting together a progressive trivia, you might try to tailor it towards where the conversation may go. Let me just say that. So I always assume it's going to be someone from the Bay Area, since the conversation always goes there, whether that's warranted or not. More often than not, it isn't. But I think that has to do it.
The amount of progressive trivias that are about Giants or 49ers are minuscule.
I get that, but the conversation always goes there.
That's the same reason why I always guess Lin-Manuel Miranda first.
Yes,
that's my first guess.
He does, even for like NHL progressives, which is odd because I don't know that Miranda's ever been on skates. I can't confirm nor deny that.
I'm sure he has,
as an NHL player.
Multi-talented guy. I'm sure
he's probably doing a show on skates. Maybe maybe he'll follow up Hamilton with Ice Capades.
Yep, and he'll be the one dancing backwards as well and skating backwards. He'll be the Ginger Rogers of whatever happens in that, backwards and in heels.
Wicked hard slap shot.
So we do have a friend who's actually writing an opera based on hockey. So our good friend Eric is actually writing. He's an opera. He loves opera and hockey. Natural.
He does.
Enemy
Natural enemy. There's no doubt about it. No, I can't wait. I can't wait.
He's actually actively putting it together. He's the type of guy who could get this thing produced.
I'm excited.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I just want the role of the enforcer. I just want to be able to skate as well as I can, which is not good, and just rail off and just punch somebody so hard it just injures people that they've yet to meet. I have a little anger.
It would be odd for a producer to cast a 56-year-old as a hockey player.
No, the enforcers typically are 56 years old. They're old, grizzled vets.
It's right.
Come by.
Right, with no cartilage left in their knees or anything, and basically they can barely. Average age of an enforcer in the NHL is 56, which means there got to be a couple of guys in their like 90s.
Yeah, that's what it means.
Because I know when Ty Domi started, he was in his 20s. So I mean, it's going to kill the curve right there.
Right now, Gordie Howe was not an enforcer.
No,
and he played till he was 187.
186. He retired 2 weeks before his 187th birthday.
He showed up for the first game of his 187th season, but to be retired.
Yeah, so he could retire in a Hartford Whalers jersey. Sadly, they'd already moved to Carolina.
Well, and it was sad that he wasn't able to retire on his own terms. They had to cut him. That was just really tough.
Ugly. Well, that's what happens when you're an athlete.
Yeah, it really does. Well, speaking of hockey, They're not doing what basketball is doing. They're not having any regular season games. They're going right into a round robin to whittle down the 24 teams that have qualified to 16. And this round robin, I think, and Jeff, you can correct me, but I think it's maybe 3 games tops, 3 or 4 games. And it's really against teams around your area in the standings, which actually, think about it, this makes sense because you don't want Boston and Washington, and Philadelphia, like the teams that are playing pretty well, or the Islanders.
The Capitals play 7 games in the round robin. So
okay, so maybe it's 7, but it's mainly against Boston and Philly and Tampa, all the teams that are up there in that part of the standings, because you don't want those good teams to be playing those number 22, number 23, number 24, who are fighting to get into this round of 16 official playoff tournament. And I think that's pretty smart, pretty interesting. So it's going to be pretty fun for those teams that are ranked between 17 and 24 to see if they can fight their way into this thing.
And the other teams is just a warm up. It's like a preseason for the teams
exactly.
that are already in, and the teams that are fighting for it are going to have to step up and play.
I think it's a smart way to go about things because they built some interest into those early games because there were some teams playing their way in, and it also gives their opportunity as opposed to just a straight bye for the other teams. Gives the other teams an opportunity to get their sea legs, for lack of a better term, underneath them and get some competitive games going. I'm looking forward to seeing how they're able to handle everything in the NHL because they announced their plan back, I think, like the 22nd of May or something was when they actually announced this is what we're going to do. And then they had the longest lag time between that and when they announced what they were going to do and when they actually got it started. I thought that was really smart. It gave them an opportunity to have more time to be more flexible if they needed to be. But it looks like they were going to be able to move forward with that. And I think it's going to be a really interesting tournament. I'm looking forward to it.
I think 90% of that time was meeting with Trudeau to figure out if he'd let people come across the border or not.
Yeah. And they had a lot of plans out there about how many cities they were going to play in. Would it be just one? Could they split that up a little? Did they want somebody in the lower 48 and one in Canada? And that proved to be that was going to be very difficult.
They badly wanted Vegas and Toronto.
They did.
Yep.
They wanted Vegas badly.
Couldn't make it happen.
Nope.
Could. And we get it. We get it. By the way, and again, in our effort to mention anything that is a comment, Tom Marino now incredulous that I'm only 56. Just turned 56 a couple of weeks ago, actually. 11 days ago.
Incredulous. That's an incredulous tone in his question.
Really, I think people who know me, not incredulous that I am 56, I think more incredulous that I made it to 56. Because when I first met Mark, you remember the book that I was writing, How to Live to 52. And treat my body like a rodeo from time to time.
John, you are one bottle of hair dye away from looking 40.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm on a Spectrum commercial that far too many people have seen. It's very disturbing for me. I wouldn't have auditioned for it if I'd known it'd been that widespread. But I had to color my. Oh no, actually, I'm sorry. That's wrong. It was the Advent commercial. I did 2 commercials in 1 year, which means I'll never do another one. But they made me dye my hair for that, and I did look somewhat younger. And it was a hair color I hadn't had since I was 20.
I think it averages out. You got the face of a 40-year-old and the hair of a 60-year-old. So right there in the middle.
All right. And the hair's getting, I'm soon it's going to be 1981 Kenny Rogers hair.
Gosh,
because it's just.
When's the last time? I mean, I haven't had a haircut since.
I haven't had a haircut since February. So
maybe February for me as well. Yeah. And did you get a haircut finally, Jeff, or did you give yourself a haircut? Or
I gave myself a haircut. I buzzed my hair, and then my wife came in and did the tweaking that was needed.
My hair loom is way too large in my legend to take.
It really does,
chances.
John. It really does. And my 7 hairs loom large as well.
It's a defining instinct. I've had more than one woman say to me, "You have great hair," and when you start hearing that, I can't make any changes. I can't make any changes.
You can't. We are such slaves to what women think of us. It's just
agreed.
Remarkable.
Absolutely.
It's like we're all 13.
And here's the thing. Women don't think of us. That's the issue.
That's the thing.
More often than not.
We spend so much energy worrying about something women don't even do.
No. No.
I think I'm more to entertainment producers because I was told to put glasses on, and I mean I got up immediately and put them on.
Yeah, you sure did. You sure
now that
did.
was just he didn't really care about that. It was just a way of saying, look at the two old guys. That's all it was. More justification
Those
for
were
running us out the door.
glasses.
Yeah. More justification for running us out the door, Mark.
I know. I certainly don't have any higher expectations than you do, John, about what post-coronavirus careers are going to look like for you and I. But it should be fun for the people on the outside to just see what happens. Just
Not even slow. Just decay.
Yes.
As this podcast goes on and you and I get thinner because we can't afford food. And our backgrounds go from these nice middle class things to just shanty, and could be broadcasting from like a drainage pipe somewhere on I-4. I mean, I think there's a relatively good chance that happens.
We're reaching a great internet connection from the bridge at I-4, though.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
I'll be just standing outside of a Starbucks trying to pick up their Wi-Fi so I can do. I don't know, Mark. I really think that the Angels can. Desperately.
Okay, as if we would still be so tied to this idea that we have to sort of throw a bone to sports. I have gotten people, yes, mostly my family members, who say they love when we're talking about Hamilton. They love when we're talking about history. They love when we're talking about anything but sports. And then all of a sudden it's sports, and she goes, and my sister just goes, this is just boring. I'm going to turn it off. I'm just going to turn it off.
And again, that's
off of sports real quick.
Yeah, we're not going to stay there that long.
No, hang in there, Lauren. Hang in there. Hang in there with us. All right, let's go back to Progressive. Final 3 clues. We're going to go back to give you all of the initial clues. First, let's do that. I have led the league in receptions, All-Pro, 60-plus touchdowns, 1,000-plus receiving yards. Those are the first 4 clues. Second 4 clues, played 14-plus years in the league, 90-plus receptions, played in multiple Super Bowls, played for 3 teams. Final 4 clues, 1980 All-Rookie team, 60-plus playoff receptions. I'm a Hall of Famer, and I played with Randall Cunningham and Boomer Esiason. And I'm going to add this in case people are still trying to figure this out who are just listening to the podcast. I'm going to add this. He went to a school that is now in the ACC, but it was, correct me if I'm wrong, John, was in the Big East prior to that. Is that correct?
That is correct.
That is correct. All right. So there it is. Those are your 12, actually 13 clues for our Progressive Trivia that was immediately guessed in the first 4 clues.
Yep.
And that's where I'm at. All right. So I want to talk briefly now about our deep dive coming up on Friday, John.
Yeah.
Our deep dive coming up on Friday is pretty fun, I think, because not only is it going to talk about an iconic moment in baseball history, not only is it going to talk about a great story of redemption in life, not just baseball history.
Right.
Not only is it going to, be a great underdog story, but it's also going to be against a backdrop of a country in turmoil and a year that, while not as obviously not as tumultuous as the prior year in '68, certainly had a lot of cultural iconic things happen in it. So to me, I think it will have a little bit for everyone, this deep dive.
Well, I think a wider sweep.
Even people that don't understand sports or baseball.
I think a wider sweep of cultural significance than even 1968, because we will be diving into the 1969 New York Mets. And while 1968, the cultural upheaval was the story, 1969 had Man on the Moon. It had the NFL upset in January of that year that really kind of pushed the league into the massive favored sport, because prior to the 60s, really baseball was the biggest sport in the world, or in the country, and football surpassed it. And a lot of reasons were the Jets upsetting the Colts in '69. So you also had Woodstock in 1969. You had an inauguration of Richard Nixon, which really changed the trajectory of the country in many ways. And on top of that, you had this team the New York Mets, that for the first 6 years, the first 5 years, excuse me, I believe it is, of their existence, averaged 108 losses a year.
They averaged 108 losses.
108 losses a year. They lost 120 their first season.
They did.
They were the worst team in the history of baseball, 42 and 120.
And still,
they never lost under 100. In that period of time, only 1 year did they lose under 100 games. And I think they lost like 98 one year. They never finished in at a time prior to 1969 where it was just the American League and the National League. There weren't any division play. You just won the pennant regular season. They never finished better than 9th in a 10-team not division, but league. Yeah, never finished better than 9th in a league of 10 teams. The historic ineptitude of the Mets. But Remarkable. they were the most popular baseball team in New York during that entire period. They outdrew the Yankees, even in the 120 loss season. They outdrew the Yankees. So we're going to talk about obviously the cultural upheaval of the time, the Mets themselves. We're going to talk about Robert Moses and how the New York of today became the New York of today, and how his decisions on roads, bridges versus public transportation drove both the Dodgers and the Giants to the West Coast, and laid the groundwork for there to be the New York Mets. And also let everybody know that if they want to know more about Robert Moses, the fictionalized character of Robert Moses appears in the film Motherless Brooklyn, which is a movie that I highly recommend. And the Alec Baldwin character in that is really based on Robert Moses. But Robert Moses' decision to a number of decisions really pushed the O'Malleys to move the Dodgers to Los Angeles. And the Giants followed suit there, so that New York, which had 2 National Leagues and an American League team, all of a sudden just had 1 American League team. So that opened up the idea for the Mets. So we'll talk about all of that stuff. It's a fascinating story. I've watched in total the total broadcast of every single one of that 5-game series in 1969. I've watched it all.
Wow.
I've watched it all.
Nice.
I watched the whole thing. It's fascinating. How
about the divisional series against the Atlanta Braves?
I've only watched the highlights of that divisional series, but that's the other thing about in '69, and hopefully we'll have an opportunity to talk about that. And Lenny Rowe commenting possibly the greatest final 6 weeks of a season, and that is absolutely correct. But how good the National League West was at that time. And of course, Mark, you would know. You were 9 years old in 1969, so you're right in the sweet spot for that. That was an amazing Giants team. That was a great Dodgers. There was a good Dodgers team at that period of time too.
And the Reds were coming on. The Reds were about to make their move.
They were. The Reds were about to step into the limelight, and then the Giants, Braves, Dodgers, Reds. It was probably the most competitive division in baseball, whereas the American League West were exactly the opposite. Because they had 2 expansion teams, the Seattle Pilots and the Kansas City Royals in 1969. It's just great. And then these names that we will mention that had figured much earlier in baseball and will figure much later in baseball. Guys like Nolan Ryan, who
it's so interesting though. Yeah. He wasn't. What was he, a reliever? I think he maybe made one
spot starter and reliever. Spot starter and reliever. Had most of his success in the series as a relief pitcher. Yeah.
And so he's not an afterthought. He's obviously part of the team, but he wasn't a major necessarily part of the team. And to your point earlier, that there was so many lineups and there was so much platooning with the New York Mets. There wasn't any real star of the team outside of maybe Tom Seaver. Seaver
was the big name on that team. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Seaver was the guy. Jerry Koosman was a good pitcher.
Yeah.
But he was not, Jerry Koosman on the Baltimore Oriole team that lost to the Mets in 5 games. Koosman would have been the 5th starter.
And that's the point too. Not only is that team loaded, that Baltimore Orioles 1969 team, absolutely loaded. I think they won 108 games that year. But they have a team stocked with names. You've got Brooks Robinson, Frank Robinson, Jim Palmer. I mean, you've got iconic Hall of Famers on that team, including the guy who managed them. He's a Hall of Famer, right? Earl Weaver?
Earl Weaver is a Hall of Famer. The starting second baseman for that Oriole team is the winningest manager in New York Mets history, Davey Johnson.
Yeah,
is your Mark Belanger at shortstop was a perennial all-star. They were Paul Blair. They were the best team in baseball. Most people, Rod Carew, who was on the Minnesota Twins team that lost to the Orioles in the divisional playoffs, said it. He said, of course we were worried. They were the best team in baseball, and they would go to 3 consecutive World Series, starting in 1969, winning in 1970. It's just remarkable. And then, these ancillary stories, and I hope we have a chance to get to them. But the manager of the American League West winning Minnesota Twins is Billy Martin.
Right.
So, the managers involved in the American League at that point in time, Earl Weaver, Billy Martin, Dick Williams, are the guys who will be the managers of note in the American League, really, through that the whole decade of the 70s.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it.
It's a great story. And again, they are still in American sports, it's the largest upset championship of any team.
And I don't even think you've gotten to how New York was the sort of the epicenter of sports that year as well. You mentioned the upset for the Jets, but the Knicks as well.
Yeah.
And it was a very special time to be in New York.
And New York itself,
not necessarily a special time to be in New York.
Right. That's what I was going. New York itself was in a steady decline that it had been going through for about a decade at that point in time.
You know why, John? You know why?
Why, Mark?
Democratic mayors.
You got to smile out of Jeff.
Evidence is there. So, all right, I can't wait. I'm going to be spending a lot of time promoting. John won't, but I'll do what I can promoting this deep dive because I can't wait. It's going to be a lot of fun, and we're going to try and mess with some visual aids as well. If you can catch us on YouTube, get some pictures and perhaps even some video.
And you'll find out why Gil Hodges is the most important person of every single person that I'll mention during my discussion of the 69 Mets, because I can't
wait to hear that.
It really is Gil Hodges that is the most responsible for that 69 Mets team.
Yeah. All right.
Absolutely.
All right. I'm looking forward to it. Jeff, anything to add before we close up shop here on this Monday, July 13th, 2020?
Yep. Dying to know the answer to that progressive trivia. Dying to.
Yeah, probably ought to give that to people, Mark.
Let's do it. Let's do it right now. Thank you, Jeff.
You're welcome.
Here we go. All right, let's go back. I guess we'll go back all the way.
For those of you listening on the podcast, we're now scrolling backwards through the clues on the progressive trivia slide.
Indeed, that's exactly what we're doing.
Let everybody know.
Everyone know exactly what's happening visually.
And there's a picture on the screen of Mark and I when we had a radio show.
So yes. And I have not changed any pictures or commented on the pictures themselves, because why would you care if you're listening to the podcast right now?
Although if you're listening to the podcast and you are wondering what these pictures are, you can go to our YouTube channel and watch.
Yeah.
That is also really something I never did say to the constructive criticism that I got yesterday at 2 different times. I never said, you could alleviate all these issues.
You don't even have to watch the whole thing. You could just scroll to the point where you were left out and see what you missed.
It's an excellent point.
It's a very good point, Jeff. Thank you very much. I've led the league in receptions. I'm an all-pro, 60-plus touchdowns, 1,000-plus receiving yards, 14-plus years in the league, 900-plus receptions, played in multiple Super Bowls, played for 3 teams. Also was a member of the 1980 All-Rookie team, 60-plus playoff reception in his career. He's a Hall of Famer, and he played with Randall Cunningham and Boomer Esiason at different times in his career. Who am I? Indeed, the great Art Monk.
Who, when he retired, had the NFL record for most receptions, I believe, was 966 or something on that order, I believe. Might
so,
be wrong
John,
with the number.
you thought there were 2 possible lanes I would take today. One is, a homer lane about the Giants or the 49ers. You said Roger Craig to begin with. But you thought the other lane would be something about the Washington Redskins because we were going to be talking about them today?
Well, our lead story.
You thought I was going to theme it?
Well, I thought our lead story being about the Redskins, there was a possibility that you could go with a Redskin choice. But I thought when you led with receptions and that, try to sneak that in because a guy like Roger Craig, who, was great catching the football out of the backfield and a terrific running back. So that was my thought. I probably overthought it a little. I should have gone maybe to a Redskin. And we won't call them that anymore, to a Washington football player.
A Washington football
By the
team.
way, can I ask one question of both of you? Do you have, particularly get Jeff's opinion on this, do you have a favored name?
I don't have a favorite name, but I do say that the Code Talkers was suggested today. I kind of dig that. Staying in the vein, and it doesn't roll off the tongue that great, but
difficult. Red Wolves is getting some.
I saw Red Wolves.
Love.
Warriors is my favorite name.
It is, but they've said that they were going to do away with the Native American imagery as well. So I don't know if that is. I don't know if that's just referring to the helmet sticker now and that, or if they meant they were going to pull away completely from anything that would feel like a Native American name.
Well, let me stay in the vein of the show and say that Golden State does not use any of that imagery.
Right. So it is certainly possible that they would go with Warriors. I had said earlier that I thought that would be an easy fix and they could go back to the spears on the helmet, but apparently that's not what they want to go to. Red Wolves, Red Tails are very popular right now.
Bullet is available.
Does how I
had an issue with
Washington
that name change.
Wizard. I mean, I know you had an issue with the change from Bullets to Wizards, but I have more of an issue with Washington Wizards. The alliteration of WW.
Well, there
Washington Warriors would sound kind of weird to me.
There was some history to the Wizards name. There had been like some sort of ancillary professional or semi-professional league that there was a Washington Wizards team. My biggest issue with when they made that change was they went away from the name and then they went completely away from the color scheme and everything, which now they've gone back to. And I like the Wizards going back to the old Bullets jerseys. I think that looks better and it's easier for me to get behind it. They're apparently
the Washington Generals, I think, is the best.
I would have no problem with that.
That would be awesome.
I would have no problem with that whatsoever.
That's Joe Connolly's name that he's still sticking with. Lenny, the Washington Football Club.
There was a great Onion article that said Washington Redskins have now committed to changing their name. The new name will be the DC Redskins.
I know. I
love that. That was I thought that was pretty funny. I enjoyed that, but
the DC Redskins is just classic.
So you don't like you don't like the alliteration, Mark, because a lot of teams like Los Angeles Lakers, there's no lake within a light year of Los Angeles, and but Lakers fit because they came from Minneapolis, which is a land with a lot of lakes, and Lakers sort of fit. Los Angeles Lakers sounds good.
It does. The LA Lakers sounds good as well, but it would be like if it would be Los Lakers. It's the thing about the alliteration that's the one word and it's the next word. You have at least Angeles in between Los Angeles and Lakers. But it just does with Washington Wizards. It just doesn't seem as strong. I'm not sure why. Maybe it's the W alliteration. But I like the name Warriors. I just think it's odd. The Washington Warriors.
It was the worst. The Wizards was the worst name in basketball until the Pelicans.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would agree with that in every way. I would agree with that. But I'm kind of I love the idea of the Red Tails because of the historical significance of that. Red Wolves, like I said, is getting a lot of push, and there's some significance to that as well. So
should they continue to try and honor Native Americans in this new name whilst not having any of that imagery that's now currently on the uniforms and on the helmet? Oh, the only reason I asked that one, John, is because Red Tails would go away from that completely and would honor the Tuskegee Airmen,
right?
African Americans, which is I'm all for, but I'm wondering if there's some sort of need to continue to honor Native Americans.
Well,
or at least honor them as opposed to
finally honor them.
Yes, finally honor them. Yes.
Yeah, I don't know, but again, they made the comment, and it is somewhat nebulous that they're going to go away from the Native American any of the visual aspect of Native Americans. Losing the word here, but So I would be surprised if they went in that direction, frankly. And you could do Warriors to Jeff's point, and it doesn't necessarily have to be American Indian Warriors, Native American
Ultimate
Warriors.
Warrior, the wrestler.
No, I like that. I like Warriors as a name. I'm not sure it totally works, but who knows? We'll see. We are all very surprised about how fast this decision was made, how fast it became official that they're definitely going to change the name, and we'll see how fast it's going to take them. How long it's going to take them to come up with a new name, and I'm looking forward to it. It's fun.
And frankly, I think Dan Snyder's going to make a crap load of money on it because I think they're going to change it. There's going to be all new merchandise, and I think a lot of people are going to go out and buy that merchandise. So,
and buy the old stuff, which is going to be highly valued at this point. Because
I have a shot glass. I have a shot glass and a hat still.
See, there you go. Those things are already worth $1.6 million.
Because I'll never work again, and I'm going to need that money. Because apparently, according to certain people, I'm too old.
All right. Well, that's it. Chime in with what the team formerly known as the Redskins should name themselves. Go to podcastafr@gmail.com, podcastafr@gmail.com, or chime in with anything else you want us to talk about. We're going to have another free-for-all on Wednesday, and then the deep dive on Friday, the 1969 Miracle Mets. For Jeff Taylor, John Pelkey, I'm Mark Ferreira. You've been listening to After Further Review. Stay safe, everyone.